So we're going to go ahead and get started. You can still complete the poll. Welcome to Finding Food in Your City Government webinar, hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future and the Center for Government Excellence, also called GovEx. My name is Ann Palmer, and I'm a program director at the Center for Livable Future and the Food Policy Networks Project. In the room with me are Rachel Santo, a research coordinator at the center, and a few of our speakers, Caitlin, Kat, and Holly, who I'll introduce in a moment. We're delighted to have a packed agenda on our plate, so I'll try to keep the introduction brief, and we are hoping for an uneventful webinar, unlike last week. So to speak with you about working on food systems in local government, we have with us today Ya Taryor, who is the outreach coordinator for the Summerfield United Methodist Church and works to create a meal program and day center for people in need around Milwaukee's East Town neighborhood. He became the president of the Milwaukee Food Council in 2018 and is active on its policy subcommittee. Tim McCallow is the project manager for Milwaukee's Homegrown initiative. Tim created Mayor Tom Burnett's Homegrown initiative and serves on the board of directors through the Milwaukee Food Council and the Cooperative Institute for Urban Agriculture and Nutrition. Jaleesa Dawkins is a local food system strategy manager who joined the Columbus Public Health Department in August of 2017 to work on the implementation of the Columbus and Franklin County Local Food Action Plan. Jaleesa serves on the joint city-county local food team and the Franklin County Local Food Council. Cheryl Graffinino leads the Columbus Public Health local food system efforts, including the development of an award-winning, regionally and nationally recognized Columbus and Franklin County Local Food Action Plan. In this role, Cheryl is responsible for identifying and connecting innovative efforts to improve food access in Columbus neighborhoods, especially those most affected by health disparities. Holly Friestadt is Baltimore's first food policy director. She started the Baltimore Food Policy Initiative, an intergovernmental collaboration focused on food system policy. She has 2 decades of experience working on food systems issues as a policy strategist, educator, and grower. Caitlin Miziazik joined the Center for Livable Future in 2013 as a data specialist and is currently a program officer in the Food Communities and Public Health program. She's responsible for managing the food system mapping team, which includes overseeing the Maryland Food System Map and leading the Baltimore City Food Environment Research. Kat Klozek is the Director of Applied Research at GovEx. She began her career in performance management and Governor O'Malley's state stat office here in Maryland and led the Baltimore Partnership to End Childhood Hunger before joining GovEx in 2015. Before we begin the presentation, I'm going to go briefly over a few features of Zoom, the video conferencing webinar system we're using today. So all of the attendees are in listen-only mode. At any point during the conversation, you are free to put a question either in the Q&A box, which is on the floating toolbar on the bottom of your screen, typically. Is that right? Oh, sorry, yeah, it could be either on the bottom or your top. It'll say Q&A. There's also a comments box that you can use. We'll be checking both. If you have any issues with sound or viewing the slides, send us a message via the chat box, also on the floating toolbar. And you can use that to share any resources you want to share with any of the participants today. We're going to be recording the webinar, and we'll be sending the slides out afterwards. As I mentioned before, the webinar is being hosted by CLF, Interdisciplinary Center located at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Our work focuses on the intersection of diet, environment, food production, and public health. And our project, the Food Policy Networks Project, is one of the projects with the goal of building capacity for food system stakeholders to reform state, local, regional, and tribal food systems through public policy. We do that through training, sharing best practices, networking with other food policy groups and leaders, and developing and providing resource materials. If you're not familiar with our project, we encourage you to check out the website and sign up for our listserv to hear about future webinars. Thank you all for being with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Ya and Tim to start us off.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. It's going to go well today, and we're hoping that everything is smooth. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? All right, well, Milwaukee's Food Council was established in 2007 by Martha Kipchak, who has been advocate for food system change within the city. And she started the idea as basically an organization that was going to meet with people that were interested in the food system within the city of Milwaukee. Around 2016, the organization changed from basically a get-together meeting organization into focusing on becoming a nonprofit. We are now at that process right now. Actually, in 2017, all our paperwork was done. So if you would like to fund us, you can send money to us. We're 100% volunteer at this time, and people that are on our board and other committees are very active within developing planned agendas and organizational things that we need to do. We have meetings each month, but our general meetings are bi-monthly and our board meetings are bi-monthly. And usually during those general meetings, we have attendance up to 45 to 50 people. And again, at this time, we have 45 paying members, but we've gone to about 81 in the last 2 years. Can you move to the next slide? Some of our groups that are represented within the Milwaukee Food Council are foundations, churches, similar to what I do, hospitals, restaurants, emergency food banks, urban ag organizations, government, university, public health, and CHS, that are trying to deal with health and wellness. At this time, again, we're a nonprofit organization, so we don't really deal too much with government policy, but we have established a strong relationship with the city government to try to get things going and help them with a process of figuring out what they need to do with policy on food. So you can go to the next slide, and Tim, I guess, will take over from here.
Good morning, everybody. Tim McCullough, City of Milwaukee, and briefly, I run the Mayor's Homegrown initiative, which is run out of our city sustainability office called the Environmental Collaboration Office, and generally I'm known as the Mayor's Food Guy. So we work on food policy, and I've been doing that type of work for about 5 years. And first want to thank GovEx and Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future for being able to put this on. I think it's a great topic, and really want to just kind of bring some context to this. What we want to talk briefly about is the formalized relationship that the Milwaukee Food Council established with the city of Milwaukee, and how we got there. And the context is that we've been working with the Food Council informally for years now, and I was a member of the board of directors of the Food Council for about 2 years, helping shape policy, and we've had a very good relationship. And I mean, it's truly an existing high quality, and it was an informal relationship until relatively recently. What you see on your screen is the City of Milwaukee 2013 Sustainability Plan called Refresh MKE. Was established through that particular document. If you can go to the next slide, please. The Refresh MKE plan was really a holistic plan, sustainability plan for the city. And you can see that food systems was a significant chapter, given as much weight as energy, buildings, water, et cetera. And in the public outreach that we did in the formulation of the sustainability plan, healthy food access, food issues, and vacant land issues really came to the forefront of the polling that we had done of Milwaukee residents. So food was really elevated to be a major concern of the city of Milwaukee. Where the formal relationship between the city of Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Food Council comes from is, if you can go to the next slide, please. In the goals that we had established in the food system chapter, You can see the goal on the right, and it's also spelled out on the left, that we would formally coordinate between the city and the Food Council. And what we really wanted was the Food Council to be our eyes and ears on the ground in Milwaukee's community food system and create the ability for ideas and policies to bubble up from the community rather than being top down. And we started down a path of creating an official city food policy task force, and we did work on that for about a year, both inside and outside City Hall. And after about a year, we realized that while other cities had emulated that model, we really did not have the staff resources to manage a formal official food policy task force. So we looked for a new direction. And the new direction that we chose to still formalize the relationship was we established an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the City of Milwaukee and the Food Council to essentially officially establish really the existing high quality relationship that was already in place. And in short, in that Memorandum of Understanding, we agreed to jointly work with the Food Council on food policy issues. We asked really the Food Council and its subcommittees to be really the drivers of community initiatives relating to the entire food system, everything from food production to food recycling. And we agreed to a schedule of a minimum of joint number of meetings just to make sure that we were both on the same page as a municipal government, as well as really the city's leading food group. So, we have been attending Food Council meetings really for a number of years, and a number of departments, including the City Environmental Collaboration Office, as well as the City Public Health Department, has been involved in the Food Council for years. And we've had a number of successes. We actually had a formal CSA Day this year, National CSA Day on February 20th, promoting CSAs across the city and trying to get city employees to sign up, and that actually turned out to be very successful. And we're working on a number of other initiatives. And one of the main goals is really to get to the point with the Food Council where Food Council has full-time staffing, because we've made a lot of progress in the city of Milwaukee in the last couple of years, with the caveat that the Food Council is truly an all-volunteer organization with, and everyone who is working on either subcommittees or as a board member or is attending Food Council meetings is also working really hard in their day job as well. And I think in terms of challenges in closing out, the not creating the official city food policy council was a disappointment to the Food Council. That was something that they had very sought, and really on the city side, we could really not come up with the FTEs and the staff time and the manpower to be able to manage that committee. That was a challenge that we've tried to overcome, and a disappointment on the Food Council. And then if you go to the next slide, really, in terms of closing out, this is our contact information. We talk to folks nationwide. Please feel free to contact us. And
yes, please contact us. We're willing to listen to ideas, and maybe we have some examples of things that are working here that we can also share within your communities. So keep in touch with us, please.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that until question and answer time. Thank you.
Great, thanks to you both. And Jaleesa and Cheryl, do you want to go next?
Sure. Are you pulling up our slides? Okay, great. So, and then can I have control, or do you need to?
If you want control, then you need to share from your screen, and you can
go ahead and just go to the next slide then.
Okay.
So my name is Jaleesa Dawkins, and I'm here with my colleague Cheryl Graffinino, and we work at Columbus Public Health on the Local Food Action Plan, and we work on local food system strategies. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we're going to discuss during our time with you all. And so we're going to start with an introduction of the Local Food Action Plan, which is the base of our work in the city and the county for food systems. And it's not just the city and county that look at this plan. It's also some of our independent organizations, for-profits, nonprofits. They look at what the Local Food Action Plan is doing and compare their work they try to make sure that they're incorporating what is in the Local Food Action Plan in their work. We're also going to talk about our Food Policy Council and the role that they played in developing our plan, as well as what they are doing in implementation and helping us implement this plan. I'm going to pass it on to Cheryl for background information and history of the plan.
Sure. Good afternoon. Both the City of Columbus, the City Council, and the Franklin County Board of Commissioners have a long history of strong support for local food initiatives. This support has included community garden grants, food business incubation programs, and food access programs throughout our community. Over the years, both Columbus Public Health, Franklin County Economic Development and Planning, as well as other city and county departments have provided both financial and programmatic support for community gardens, SNAP purchasing incentives, healthy corner store initiatives, just to name a few. As we move on to the next slide, we identified a number of years ago that while both the city and county government were actively working on local food system efforts, numerous community-led efforts were also underway. One of those efforts was the formation of the Franklin County Local Food Council in 2011. The initial membership of the Local Food Council included staff from Columbus Public Health and from Franklin County Economic Development and Planning, as well as city and county staff have been consistently engaged with the council throughout its lifespan. As you'll see on the next slide, our Local Food Council started to do a lot of work in this area by developing a food policy audit. That was one of their first contributions to the work that we are undertaking now. It was developed by the Local Food Council. And so in addition to advocating for local government support that support a strong and resilient local food system, this food policy audit scored the food system policies in Franklin County across 4 categories: food security and sustainability, zoning and land use, public health and food access, and social equity. The final score out of 100 was 54. Indicating that the Franklin County area had plenty of opportunities to continue strengthening the local food system. The report also drew on the expertise of stakeholders at 13 local institutions, many of which were public agencies working in the food system in some capacity. At the end, this report provided 11 recommendations for priority policy areas to focus on in Franklin County. This report from our Local Food Council laid the foundation for the Local Food Action Plan in 2 different ways. One, it identified the key issues in our food system and provided some strategic recommendations for addressing them. And 2, it provided a structure and a process to build and strengthen important relationships in the food system and bring local government partners to the table. So the Franklin County Board of Commissioners actually adopted a resolution to support a strong and resilient local food system as a result of this report. The resolution included a commitment to consider the impacts of the local food system in future decisions and to continue to support the efforts of the Franklin County Local Food Council. And so as we're talking about this, if it seems a little bit disjointed, at that time in our history it was. We had the council working on things, we had city and county departments working on things, but nobody was really coming together in a very meaningful way. We were trying to make that space, but not necessarily as effectively as we wanted to. So in 2014, Columbus City Council and Franklin County Board of Commissioners directed Columbus Public Health and Franklin County Economic Development and Planning, along with a nonprofit partner, Local Matters, to develop a local food action plan for the city of Columbus and Franklin County. This action from our City Council and County Commissioners launched a 2-year, 3-phase planning process that we conducted and was supported by a 24-member working committee. The project team, consisting of staff from city of Columbus at Columbus Public Health and Franklin County Economic Development and Planning, as well as partners from Local Matters, led our project team. So our job was to do the heavy lifting. Each of us were actively involved in the council and had participated in the Franklin County Food Policy Audit. The partnership was unique because it brought together various perspectives: economic development, public health, equity, social justice, and ensured that they were all intentionally considered in all project phases. 4 members of the project team were also active members of the Franklin County local food process during the planning process. So our project team, so 4 members of the project team were active on the Food Council. And then from our 24-member working committee that guided the work of the project team, a number of those council members also served on the working committee. So we went back and forth and cross-pollinated this project with the local food council. The planning process consisted of 3 phases. We did a current conditions and vision phase to gain an understanding of the current assets and needs in the community and to understand the community's vision for a food system. The policy audit that had already been conducted by the local food council was extremely instrumental in this process. Then our nonprofit partner Local Matters facilitated 18 community meetings in 7 Columbus neighborhoods to identify and explore neighborhood-specific goals. And then the local food council contributed through listening sessions on specific food system topics and the findings from the food policy audit that was completed in 2012. At the end of this phase, the project team, the staff from City, County, and Local Matters collaborated with our 24-member working committee to produce a report of this result, and it is available on our website. The program policy and recommendations phase then kicked off, which was really focused around identifying actions with the greatest potential to have a positive impact on our food issues that were identified in the current conditions phase. This was a very extensive review of local, regional, state, national best practices. And basically we identified a list of over 850 potential actions that could be done in our community. And together with help from the local food council, the working committee, and the project team, we narrowed that down to 147 that actually might work in Columbus in Ohio. And so from there, those groups helped us narrow it down to the final 27 actions that are included in our plan. And those are ultimately the ones that were identified as having the greatest potential to have a positive impact in our local food system. And from there, the teams together worked to draft the local food action plan that is available to us now. And the final plan was completed and adopted as a policy framework in November of 2016 by both Columbus City Council and Franklin County Board of Commissioners. And so from there, I'm going to turn it over. So once we had the plan adopted, that now put us in a place where we had an official policy plan and policy platform for the city and county to help us begin to move forward. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Jaleesa to tell you a little bit about the implementation of that plan.
So the Columbus and Franklin County, next slide, please. The Columbus and Franklin County Local Food Action Plan is rooted in the belief that all residents should have access to, first and foremost, nutritious and affordable food. The plan looks at barriers to access and is intended to inform public policy, inspire program development, foster community collaborations, guide local funding strategies, and establish the foundation for successful philanthropic and grant applications. And this vision is a fair and sustainable food system that benefits our economy, our environment, and all people. So the goals of the plan to support this vision are on the next slide, please. Goal A is to enhance coordination and communication among existing food resources and agencies. So we have many food system projects that are going on in Columbus and Franklin County, but we needed to make sure that everybody was playing on each other's strengths and communicating. So this goal is looking at improving collaboration. Goal B is to improve access to and education about healthy food, affordable food, and local food. And these are all 3 distinct categories. Goal C is to increase the role of food in economic development. And this is using food to create jobs and to enhance our local economy. And goal D is to prevent food-related waste. In Franklin County, 12.8% of our landfill is food waste, and that's residential as well as commercial sources. And so this goal looks at improving composting and recycling to prevent the food-related waste. Next slide, please. So we wanted to make sure that this plan was just not written and then stuck on a shelf. This needed to be a live plan. Wanted to bring this plan to action. So that's why there's an implementation structure. And this, believe it or not, this structure was actually drawn up by Jill Clark, which is a member of the local food council. And it was drawn up on a napkin. And now we have this great illustration here. And so at the top, you can see that we have our legislative sponsors from Columbus City Council as well as Franklin County Board of Commissioners. And they appointed 6 members each to our local food board. And the local food board oversees and guides implementation. So these 12 members are the high-level executives in the food system around the city and the county. The local food team works with the board to facilitate implementation, and Cheryl and I are the city portion of the local food team, and our colleague, Brian Estabrook at Franklin County Economic Development and Planning is the county portion of the local food team. The local food board and the local food team are supported by project teams. And these project teams are food system stakeholders working together to implement actions. Their work is overseen by the board and is supported by us, the local food team. And then last but not least is the Franklin County Local Food Council, who supports the implementation through community engagement. So when people ask, what are the city and the county doing as far as food access work? Or how can we get involved in the work of the local food action plan? We tell them to go to the Franklin County Local Food Council meetings. And the local food team members provide updates regularly at these meetings. And also, we look to the council to populate these project teams that are doing the work of the plan. And so they can get involved in the work from beginning to end. And our local food council is made up of members, just community residents who have an interest in food work, and then those that actually do work and are subject matter experts in the food system. Next. So, I'm sorry, can you go back to the slide, the last slide? So we also have, so for our council, we have a representative. Ariel Miller is the chair of our Franklin County Local Food Council, and we have regular meetings. We have weekly meetings to discuss various things. But one important thing is she comes to the local food board meetings that are quarterly and provides updates as well as feedback on how implementation is going. So there's a direct line between the community and the local food board there. Pros of this implementation structure are that we have a mix of stakeholders. We have our board, which is senior level executives in the food system, and then we have our project teams, which are people that are interested in the food system, as well as those that are grassroots workers. And then we have our community residents in the Franklin County Local Food Council. And those are the people that are impacted by those decisions that those top level executives on the board are making. So there are a lot of checks and balances within this structure. Another pro is that we have legislative support. So food security is a priority because we have our city council and our board of commissioners behind this plan. Something that is a challenge is, or could be a challenge, is that our legislative sponsors can change during elections. So different elected officials have different priorities. Then another issue could be that the elected officials do not just oversee one department. They don't just oversee the health department, and they don't just oversee food access issues. So another pressing event may come up that requires urgent action on a specific issue, and that can shift resources and the focus. Okay, next slide. And again, one more slide, please. Thank you. So the council, as I stated, is an independent, non-governmental citizens advisory council, meaning that it's important that they maintain their autonomy. I do provide some capacity support for the council, but I do not direct their agenda in any way. So the council decided that they had done all of this work to develop the local food action plan, And so they needed to know what their direction was going to be. Did they want to continue work in the plan, or did they see their role as outside of the plan? And so they decided to have a strategy session. So the local food team hired a facilitator to help with that process. And the council decided on 3 priorities to direct their work for the next 2 years. So the first priority, they wanted to still help with the local food action plan implementation through community engagement. So they educate those inside of the food council as well as those in the community about food system topics and events. They engage by providing food system networking opportunities. And then for campaigns, the council wanted to engage with food system advocacy efforts by helping to plan, organize, and provide capacity for those events. And the initiatives can arise from, the ideas for the initiatives can arise from within the council as well as outside of the council. And the last priority is mentorship. They provide mentoring and development. They will provide mentoring and development networking for community groups and individuals trying to address food and social challenges. So the council can help provide vetting and feedback for people's ideas. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and direct your attention to the bottom of the screen. And I can't see it on my screen, but in case you can't as well, our website to view the plan is www.columbus.gov/LFAP, that's Local Food Action Plan. And you can download the plan, you can view all of the planning materials on there as well, and learn about the planning process in great detail. And the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the annual report that's on our homepage currently. And it shows what all of those people in the implementation structure have been doing over the past year. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much to Lisa and Cheryl. And next up we have Holly. Here's Holly.
Hi everyone. I'm the Food Policy Director for Baltimore City. And our key goal is to use food as a catalyst to address health, economic, and environmental disparities in healthy food priority areas, formerly known as food deserts. The way we do this is through our governance structure. There's 3 tiers to our work. So just to anchor this, I'm housed in the Department of Planning of Sustainability. We were formed in 2010 based off of the Food Policy Task Force recommendations. And this was really important because the recommendations came before I was hired. And so it's a 10-point plan, very broad in scope. And then they hired me in order to implement. So I was not a part of creating the goals of the initial work for the city. And so when I came in, it was very clear that food is in all government agencies. So I formed very quickly the Baltimore Food Policy Initiative. And at first, it was just the intergovernmental collaboration. So I'm housed in the Department of Planning. And then I work very closely with the Health Department and the Baltimore Development Corporation. And what we have found is that one of the things I did when I first came in, and this chart is still really relevant today, is I wanted to see where was food in city government. And what you're seeing here was what was here when I pretty much came in 8.5 years ago. So it wasn't like I suddenly had created all these government agencies to do food work. Food was everywhere. Just no one knew all the food work that was happening. And so another thing I looked at initially is I took the mayor's org chart at the time, and I said, okay, here's the org chart, here's the power structure, here's who's making decisions, and pretty much I created this mechanism to support the decision making. So in the very early years, economic and neighborhood development, these were all the agencies that fell under one deputy mayor. So I was trying to find out how do we have the pathways to get policies and decisions made. And so this is how we created this chart. And you can see that, you know, you have summer meals and emergency food over in housing, but then you also can have summer meals over at Family League, and you can start to see a lot of intersections. So it became clear that as a Baltimore Food Policy Initiative, we would support all these agencies on food work. And so I feel like my role is really in so many ways technical assistance and almost a consultant to agencies on food issues, but I work within city government. The second part is our food PAC, our Food Policy Action Coalition. And in all honesty, this has changed over time. So initially, when I formed Food PAC, it was really what organizations are doing the work on the ground and let's get them all in the room together so we can implement these task force recommendations. And that was a really good start, but it was all organizations. There were very few residents, and it was really, in all honesty, mostly white professionals in a room, and that was a good start, but we needed to transition that. So over time, we changed it from the middle of the day meeting, which is what worked for that group of people, to 4 to 6, and really started to think of how do we engage residents in this process. And so we had, we've changed our format now so that we have different working groups, or excuse me, not working groups, but workshop stations. So different nonprofits or agencies or whomever can have a question to the group. There's a lot of expertise to kind of work through the issues. And another component is really looking at just briefing of policies. I need to understand from on the ground what are the barriers, policy barriers, and then also I share different policies that are happening, whether they're federal or state as well. So this is the format of Food Pack, and since we've been around 8.5 years, it is changing again. In probably the next few months, we're going to go back into working groups because that's been one of the recommendations. The third part, which is the newest part, and I think it's the most exciting part of the work right now, is our resident food equity advisors. We piloted it last year, and then we just, as of last night, completed our second year of our resident food equity advisors. And the main goal of the resident food equity advisors is to help us drive policy and agenda from a resident perspective. And so for this year's theme that we just completed, and I'll get to a map in a second, the focus was on corner and convenience stores. And so we had 7 meetings where we briefed them on different components of corner and convenience stores and small food retail, and then they presented to Food Pack last night on the recommendations and policy agenda for corner and convenience stores. And so the process that we've done is, I'm going to move to the next slide in a sec. The process that we've done is that we have 14 council districts, and we have a representation from each of those council districts for the resident equity advisors. So that's a quick overview of our government structure and our organizational structure. And now I want to talk about what we do. How are we actually changing policy? In collaboration with Center for Livable Future and the city, we're using maps to help identify and drive a policy agenda. So together with Hopkins, we have our key priority area factors. We were calling it food deserts previously, and just in January 2018, we changed the name, but the definition remains the same. It was really a matter of reframing. And so the reframe of the issue of, there's a lot of residents in the city who want to call it, whether it's food apartheid or whatever the issues they may want to call it, let the residents frame and call the issue. But as city government, let's look at a policy agenda and put our priorities into certain areas. So in many ways, we de-escalated the name. We want to make it bland and boring, kind of government-like, so that the residents can kind of shine with their voice, and that we can really just look at the policy agenda. And this is just from my city perspective on the name change. And so what we see in Baltimore is that around 23% of residents are in priority areas. And one of the things that we really are looking at is how are we racializing this data? You know, how are we talking about this? How do we bring equity into the data that we have? And so in the past analysis, we talked about Black residents are disproportionately impacted, right? And now we're really starting to say, well, of all the Black residents in Baltimore City, 31% live in priority areas. Of all the white residents, 8.9% live in priority areas. And now we can really get to the essence of equity. And in Baltimore, it's still very much the Black and white city. And so we have to be able to understand and use our data to be able to move sort of equitable food policies, and that's why we have the resident food equity advisors as well. So this is driving a lot of our policies and agenda for the city. And so in our 2018 release of our maps, one of our newer components in the city side is that we've had a citywide brief, you can see it here, and then we have 14 council district briefs, and these are absolutely essential to the work that I do in the city, which is to really get buy-in and move a political agenda. So once these maps were released, I sat down with the Health Department of Baltimore Development Corporation and briefed every council member, all 14 of them, on their council briefs. And that will then create buy-in for the passing of different legislation. And the newest component we've done is we now have it for the state delegation as well. And so they all have their own food environment maps. And so the intention with these briefs is to help elected understand that food environment, and we really have it in 3 key areas. I would like everyone to find their place in food. Some may see it in food retail, some may see it in nutrition assistance, some may see themselves more in urban agriculture. And so the way that we're framing our work is I would like to see all electeds to find a way that food fits into their agenda and then be able to work on that work, on those areas. So we have an 8-point plan, our food environment strategy, and it's really based off of our food environment analysis as well. So the first one I've already spoken to quite a bit, our resident-driven process. The second one, you can see is improve corner and convenience stores. So the best way for us to do that was through the resident food equity advisors. The third one, retain and attract supermarkets. What's really interesting here is that after we released the 2015 food environment report and the food desert map at that time, we were able to then create a tax credit for our grocery stores that would allow them a personal property tax credit to be able to open up in a food priority area or food desert. Within 1 year of that legislation being passed, a supermarket opened. And we know that there was 5,000 people in that catchment area when that store opened. And now actually, right now in council, we are in the second reader of an amendment to that legislation that's lowering the threshold for investment for supermarkets who already exist who want to renovate. So that is another area that the map and the food deserts and then the food desert layer or priority area layer has really helped us be able to drive policy. And then public markets was really the acknowledgement that the public markets are very integral to healthy food access and also to grocery alternatives and making sure those markets represent a full staple products and not just prepared foods. And then 5 is around food distribution. 6 is really a catch-all on federal nutrition assistance. We've done a tremendous amount of work, and I guess the next slide you'll see, related to SNAP benefits and WIC and sort of the policy agenda and procurement related to that. And then we have some other folks now sustainability who are really taking the lead on urban agriculture. And then transportation is essential. What we know is supermarkets will go in certain areas, and no matter what policy agendas we have, if it doesn't fit the formula of a supermarket, they're not going to come. And so we better have a really good transportation strategy and transportation system so that residents can shop where they want, not just the closest store. So you can see here on key policy successes, our work has really expanded over time based on need and priority. We've been doing a lot of work on procurement contracts. We pretty much overhauled the summer meal food procurement contract and created nutritional standards and criteria, and actually did a request for qualifications versus lowest bid only. A federal contract doesn't really need lowest bid. It's already pretty low. And then we also do it related to aging. So procurement's a big one. I've already spoken about personal property tax credit. With the civil unrest in 2015, it really evolved our work into looking at emergency operations plans and making sure food is a part of it. So you can see from this list, we also are working on permits and policies related to urban agriculture, to farmers markets, to CSA, to animal husbandry, and to hoop houses. So it's a wide variety of a policy agenda. And so to conclude, I just wanted to kind of step back for a second and say, if you're just getting started in this work, some of my key highlights are things that I looked at or I'd recommend to look at is your governance structure. Org charts, conducting asset mapping, really understanding who's there, what they're already doing, and how can you assist in breaking down the silos. It was essential to our work, our collaboration with CLF, and we would never been able to do all this work without that research, so making sure you're partnered. And then making sure that we're not being redundant and collaborating with our partners, which we're doing through Food Pack and Equity Advisors. And then with equity, really looking at how do I help shift power, of residents, that they get the same access to power to the mayor, to the mayor's office, the meetings, and get their voices lifted, and see if I can use my place in government to help them do so. With that, that's my conclusion. I'm going to pass it along to Caitlin.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Caitlin Miziazic. I'm with the Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some resources that can be used in food system assessments and plans. And so I'm going to be speaking about the Maryland Food System Map, which is a mapping application and downloadable database of food systems data that we created here at the CLF, meant to be used by a variety of audiences, including city government, and to help in data-driven decisions and policies and programs. So the mapping application itself is really focused on the state of Maryland. However, we think that it can be used as a way to understand what kind of data are available, and also for some inspiration and ideas around visualizing that data spatially. So really there's two driving factors around this project. The idea of open data and the idea that place is really important. So we want to make sure that we have data available and easy to use and downloadable for people in their planning and evaluation. And then also to understand that data in the context of place. And so understanding how people and resources are distributed across space or the lack thereof, and how that impacts our understanding of why certain outcomes exist and what a potential solution might be. So GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, which is really a framework for collecting and managing and visualizing data, and maps are tools that researchers, community organizations, policymakers can use to visualize that data across space. So being able to look beyond just numbers in a spreadsheet and start to see some of these relationships and trends across a geographic area. Maps also really lend themselves to understanding things from a systems perspective. So being able to layer different data across different systems to understand the inequalities and trends among those systems. And then we hope that by looking at these maps and looking at data more spatially, that we can use that information to make better decisions, create effective policies and programs, use maps for communication and advocacy, and then to also monitor and evaluate change. So this is a screenshot of the Maryland food system map, and the website is down at the bottom if you're interested in looking at it online. The application launched originally in 2012, and we had about 30 data indicators on the food system. Today, we have over 175 that are available for people to download, to click around, make maps. We have food system data across the food supply chain, and then also information on population demographics, looking at health information as well as environmental indicators. And you can see on the left-hand side all of those different data categories. This slide here shows the functionality of the mapping application. And so you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, you can actually filter data by keywords. So if you're interested in a specific topic, you can type that in, and the data will be filtered, and it'll just show you indicators related to that topic area. Each of the data categories expand to show each of the layers individually that you can look at on the mapping application. And each have a little I button next to them where it will have a pop-up with a description of the data layer, the source, and where you can go to download that information. You can create your own map on here, and then also there's a share feature where you can get a shareable link of the map that you created and use it in social media or blogs or things like that. Just to show two quick examples of how you can layer some of this information and the importance of considering data spatially and through maps in your work. This is an example, for example, if you're interested in looking at local agriculture and farmers markets. So this map is of the Eastern Shore, and it's showing each of the points are farms that sell locally in some way. And we actually here at CLF compiled that data set ourselves. And I'll speak a little bit more about the actual data sources in a moment. But this is showing farms selling locally, and then also the orange boxes are farmers markets, and then also showing population density at the census tract level. So getting an understanding of where are the farms, where are the farmers markets, and then where are potential consumers in the area that you're looking at. This is another example of the counties around Washington, D.C., looking at median household income across census tracts. And the blue areas are highlighted. They're areas that are at or below 185% of the federal poverty level. So getting an understanding of income across the area that you're looking at. And then also highlighted are food stores, food retailers, and those that accept SNAP specifically. So if you're trying to get an understanding of where lower income populations are and access to food through SNAP retailers, this is an example of a map like that. And so you can see with these two examples, you can start to layer some different data together and get a better understanding, narrow your focus, and start to understand where gaps and opportunities exist within your city. This is a screenshot of where you can go to download the data. Again, this is kind of an example of where people outside of the state could come and look and see what kind of data are available across the food system for your own plans and assessments. You can download the information in spreadsheet form as a shape file. It gives a description and also where the data come from. And we also have a resource available that's a little bit more condensed to show all the different data layers that we have available on the mapping application. Again, where it comes from, to give you a better idea of if it comes from a federal public data set, so that maybe it's available in your own city, but then also things that are available within the Maryland state departments, but you may be able to get that or look at that as an idea for where you may look for that sort of information within your own state or city. And then also information that we compiled ourselves and gives you an idea of how you might be able to compile that information for your own city. And that's it for me. I'm going to pass it along to Kat.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm Kat Klosek with GovEx. GovEx was established in 2015 to work with governments to improve their data management and data use practices with the goal of improving the lives of residents. This webinar and this collaboration with CLF is part of our applied research portfolio of work. So we've heard today from experts in city and county government and nonprofits and academic partners about some great initiatives that are happening around the country in the food system world. I'm going to talk a little bit about measuring the progress of that great work. And I just wanted to start with a few points on why this is important. And Caitlin definitely talked about a few of them, right? When we have clear, meaningful metrics and performance targets, and we review those in a regular frequency, we analyze them maybe spatially using mapping tools and things like that, we can illuminate opportunities for improvement, and we can demonstrate best and promising practices as well. And we heard a little bit about sort of the turnover of elected officials, right? If we have and are measuring a long-term goal that spans the administration of elected officials, maybe we can keep them focused on that work as well. And of course, measuring and progress and sharing data can help to improve collaboration and communication among all sectors and partners. So I'm going to talk quickly about these three really high-level steps. We are going to post this online, and there are links at the end to resources for additional reading. So I'm just going to go over these three steps, which is research existing measures, setting performance targets, and conducting a data set inventory. Let's talk about researching existing measures. So we've heard a little bit about the work to kind of establish goals around food in cities and counties. We heard about, Milwaukee's sustainability plan. So cities, mayors, city managers, city council might set food-related goals that might focus on one aspect of food, maybe food insecurity, but they don't necessarily always address all aspects of the food system, like food, retail, and urban ag, which are a few that Holly mentioned. So this is a non-exhaustive list of some sources of various government documents and so on that should be available publicly. You can kind of pull through and see, are there existing goals and measures related to food, and where do they live? I'll give an example of a food-related metric appearing in perhaps an unlikely place. So this is from Kansas City, Missouri. This is actually a screenshot from their KC Stat meeting. So City Council set a really broad priority around neighborhoods and healthy communities. The yellow arrow here points to the food-related metrics under this priority. And you can see it's a bit of an unusual suspect here. The other measures aren't necessarily related to food, but together, looking at food and safety and housing and all these other issues can really help to improve neighborhoods and community health. So this table is just an example of measures, of food-related measures from around the country, including the one that we just saw from Kansas City, Missouri. You might even make a table like this when you're kind of going through those resources to see where the food-related measures might be, and just sort of capture that. the owner column indicates the department that is responsible for the particular metric. So in this case, it's city government departments primarily, but some of these measures might fall under the purview of a non-governmental partner, a food policy council, for instance, or even the Chamber of Commerce or something like that. You want to track the outcome area. So the kind of wheel visualization that Holly shared earlier is a really great resource to think about where a food-related metric might live. And then I've included the city here just for your reference to see where these examples came from. So once we have a sense of metrics, we want to actually set performance targets, and we want those to be meaningful and ambitious. So these are 3 really high-level steps to setting performance targets. Again, at the end, there's a link to more extensive reading on where to find data sets, cleaning data, and all of that. But essentially, the 3 high-level steps are going to be, you want to look at previous year's data. So you want to collect historical and baseline data for each metric. And then you want to do some type of analysis. Maybe it's a map, maybe it's creating charts and graphs. You can do that, using existing Excel tools or whatever you have. No need to get fancy with anything, but there are a lot of open source analytical tools out there as well. And then once you have a sense of where you've kind of come from with each metric and the baseline, the kind of most recent year's data, you want to find some middle ground. So again, you want to work with city leadership and folks that are doing this work on the ground to set a target that's ambitious but also achievable in your city and in a reasonable timeline. And then the third step that I'll talk about is conducting a data set inventory. So once you kind of have started to establish what metrics exist, you want to see what might be missing. And one way to do that is through a data set inventory. So a great way to get started with a data set inventory is actually to reach out to representatives of departments and even non-governmental partners and actors to see what data they use regularly. And you might actually, through that process, identify new metrics that you hadn't come across before. You can use what we call just a data set inventory template to capture and catalog this information. This is just these are just some example fields that you might want to collect. Of course, the name and description of the data set, and then some metadata on the source, frequency of update, and so on. Even if you think or know that the data that you're collecting is potentially sensitive or contains personally identifiable information, you still want to note it here and then just make a comment that the data is potentially sensitive. And there's more reading on that as well in the links that I'll share at the end. And here they are. So I think that's it. We're good for questions? Yeah. All right. So thank you.
We'll take that back.
All right, so if we could have all of our panelists go ahead and unmute themselves and return to their video. Turn it to Ann for that. We don't have the background light.
Anybody have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I think there is one. This one's open right here. So this is for Franklin County, mentioned using a scoring system for their food policy audit. Is this something they came up with on their own, or did they use a validated tool?
The Franklin County Local Food Council actually developed that tool. We're fortunate to have a tremendous number of members who are on faculty at Ohio State. And so there was some definite academic vetting on that process. But yes, that was an independently created tool.
Great, thanks, Lisa. This question is for Caitlin. For the Maryland map, can you filter out commodity farms?
So a lot of our agriculture data, aside from the one that I showed, the farm selling locally, comes from the Census of Agriculture. So that information is more aggregated at the county level, but shows information on what farms are selling. information we have available has it broken down by some specific products, looking at fruits and vegetables and animal products, but again, it's aggregated. So our farm selling locally, we do actually have some additional information attached to each of those points, looking at their specific products as well.
And as a follow-up question to that, Caitlin, are those mostly the specialty crops that go to farmers markets, would be things that would be featured in the smaller farms?
In the farm selling locally.
Mm-hmm.
That one, basically farms that have put their information out that are on things like Maryland's Best, which is a database that's through the Maryland Department of Agriculture that promotes where farms are selling. And so farmers markets through CSAs, at restaurants to schools, things like that is what we consider in our farm selling locally data set.
And another follow-up question, is there a way to track what food is grown in a county and stays in the county?
We do not have to that level. That's a really difficult question to answer in terms of distribution. We have the locations of the farms. We have where some of the schools are that, so from the farm to school census, we have some of that information on there. And then in terms of distribution, we have locations and of like distributors and processors, and we do have some information when you download that data set in terms of whether or not they try to source local, but we don't necessarily have the linkage between that farm and where they actually sell their product.
Thanks, Caitlin. I did want to mention that Tim had answered the question by text, but I don't think it's available to all of the participants. Someone asked the question about what does it mean to have paying members of the Food Council, and essentially that means that he said that for years the Milwaukee Food Council was an ad hoc group open to all, but when they became a 501c3 they needed operational funding, so they established a member class for a fee of $25 a year. All are still invited to attend all meetings, but only members have voting rights for the election. So thanks, Tim, for answering that. Our next question is for any panelist. Can you discuss some best practices for presenting unsolicited policy recommendations to municipal councils? If any of you have any ideas on that and want to share them.
This is Tim from City of Milwaukee. What we've always stated is when you're talking to municipal councils or you're trying to essentially get a ground level policy recommendation up into city government, it's really helpful to have like one aldermanic sponsor behind you. So what we've suggested a lot of times is that the Milwaukee Food Council, to the extent possible, individually try to get in and talk to all of our city aldermen or city council, whatever the term may be, but really having one advocate inside the city in the legislative branch, because they're really writing the laws, is really I think helpful to try to get an idea into city government, and before then run it by city staff, the health department, licensing departments, departments that are really going to have impacted, because you really want them to be supportive as well and not shoot you down as you're trying to lift up that proposal.
This is Cheryl and Jaleesa in Columbus, Franklin County. I agree with everything that Tim just shared, but one of the things we're trying to do in City of Columbus and Franklin County is to actually build our food council as the place where those policy advocacy ideas get vetted, start building those connections and get them into the right conversations. We're trying to build our food board as kind of that advocate too for getting it up to that higher level, because we do have both city and county legislative sponsors. So as Tim can probably mention, Jaleesa and I field phone calls every day from folks who have a great policy idea, and some of them are really feasible and great to work with. Others really need a lot of vetting and kind of adapting before they're ready to move up that level. And so we're trying to really build that food policy as that food policy count or the Food Council, sorry, my acronyms start running together after a while. The Food Council as that place to really whip it into shape as a great recommendation, and then use that board as the leverage to get to those legislative sponsors. So again, we're building the ship as we're flying it. And so, you know, but that's our end goal, is our effort to do that.
And this is Kat with GovEx. I would just add, those are great points and great suggestions. I would just add that if you can demonstrate community support with either, you know, survey or focus group data, or even someone who can, with lived experience, who can, you know, testify on behalf of the policy recommendation, those are additional great data points as well to bring to the table.
So this is Holly in Baltimore. I want to make another point that legislation is only one small piece of policy. And that's the one that we seem to always be focusing on. A lot of this other work, whether it's permits or regulations or some of the codes that may only need a few signatures to sign off, those are also really big ones that we tend to be moving quite quickly in the city. And yes, of course, we need support of council and the mayor, but that process and policy and agenda and strategy is different. And so it could be that from our food pack, someone mentions a permit, and then I can go meet with those folks and change a farmer's market permit. And we didn't actually need to change legislation. So please be really cognizant of permits and regulations and codes, as well as legislative policy.
Thanks, Holly. Another question is for Kat. Did you work at all with Amy Crone in the Maryland Farmers Market Association on the farm and market data? If so, can you share about that working relationship?
It's up in the air. It's for Caitlin.
Or maybe that's for Caitlin. Yeah, it was directed at you at the beginning.
Oh, okay. No worries.
So yeah, so some of our data sets, as I may have mentioned, come from things that are available at the federal level, and some come from state, and then some also do come from local organizations. So all of our farmers market data that's available on the map for download, we did work with Amy Crone from the Farmers Market Association to get that information. So yes, we do work with some of the local partners, and that's a great way to also get information and data in your own city to see what sorts of information lies within some of the local community organizations as well.
Thanks, Caitlin. Another question is for any of the panelists. For those with boards as a component of the Food Policy Council, how do you hold board members accountable to be present at scheduled meetings, especially on a volunteer basis?
Tim from City of Milwaukee, it was real easy when we wrote our bylaws to become a 501c3. If a board member missed 3 meetings in a calendar year, they could be removed. And that's a great question, and that's how we chose to deal with it.
So this is Holly. For the resident food equity advisors, we actually pay them for their time. And so the way that we're able to keep them accountable is they get paid after each meeting as a stipend. So each person may be getting paid differently, but if you miss more than 2 meetings, then you're no longer going to be an equity advisor.
And do you all in Columbus have any other thoughts, or should I ask the next question?
I think you can, yeah, our answer or response would be wrapped up in the 2 responses that were already given.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa. I think this question could probably be aimed at anyone as well. What are some of the ways you have found to support land access for new farmers? If anyone's working on this.
So for Baltimore, I feel like we've done a really good job on the policy side of land access, but the policy getting implemented or getting used is another story. So we have an urban ag tax credit for farmers to use on private land. It passed, it's great, no one's used it. We have a land leasing initiative that the city runs on public land, city land. And it makes it very affordable, but it's also very cumbersome, and the process takes a long time. So I think we have 5 acres under cultivation using that land leasing initiative. But our policies are pretty good for land access, the same with being able to have hoop houses. And now what we've done is we have an urban ag plan as well. And so I think our plans are also strong, but I think that we're struggling with how do people utilize and grow on this on the land with these policies.
Tim or Cheryl, want
Points.
to add anything?
We are facing the same challenge. We don't have a good answer at this point. We are continuing to work with our land bank. We are also trying to work on some zoning and code issues that would help us address some things that make it challenging. But those are slow-moving targets. So we're facing some of the same problems that you are, and I'm actually listening to Baltimore trying and thinking I'm going to have a call with you offline here so I can get some tips. So.
Tim here. In 2014, one of the first things we did as part of the Homegrown initiative was to rewrite our urban ag codes. And that we successfully implemented in 2014. And I think they're rather progressive in terms of the ability to create things such as compost farms. We already allowed chickens and bees, hoop houses, pole houses, etc. So we handled part of that through the urban ag code changes in 2014. And what we've been doing is we do have a permit to establish a community garden, which was established as part of that. But we also work very informally with folks who are interested in acquiring land from the city. And we do really give top priority to city residents. We've had a number of folks come in and say, yeah, I want 20 vacant lots. And we're like, do you live in the city? And they're like, nope. And we're like, yeah, no, thank you. We want engaged owners of those properties. So we have a leasing, we will lease almost anyone a piece of land for a year. And if they're successfully managing that piece of land, we will go to a 3, 5, or 10-year lease. And we will sell land to nonprofits for $1 to be able to, we have a number of NGOs in the town that do urban ag, and we facilitate that. So we tend to be pretty liberal, but we really vet the people that are interested in acquiring city land, and usually we walk before we run, and we start off through a very informal leasing process run by our city real estate department.
Thank you all for those answers. And I'd also like to add that we did do a webinar on this very topic last summer, I think, and I'll share that in the follow-up email in case anyone wants to dig deeper into the question about supporting land access for new farmers. We have another question. What is the appropriate role for charitable food providers like food banks in your food policy councils and initiatives?
This is Holly from Baltimore. So I just want to share a role that you may not think of, because there's a lot of the traditional sort of roles of food banks and in collaboration with government. So for us, they really were instrumental in providing food during the civil unrest and any other times of emergency. But what we learned through that process is what is the role of city government and the food bank in times of emergencies, whether it's man-made or whether it's climate-related. And so now they're actually a part of sort of our on-call emergency response team. So whenever our emergency operations center is activated and food is relevant to it, the food bank is on that call with us. And that we all have our data live, so we know what food they are moving and where are they moving it, and having it being part of our emergency operations center. So I would say the food bank has been really instrumental in looking at our food resiliency plans with us and emergency operation procedures and protocols.
Here in Columbus and Franklin County, we're home to Mid-Ohio Food Bank, and they serve, I believe, 13 counties surrounding us, as well as Franklin County, and they have really taken a lead in a couple different roles for us. One, the executive director of the food bank is on our local food board. So he's very engaged with the other pieces of the food system that are part of this process. A couple of our members on our local food council also are, including the chair, are employed by our local food bank. The local food bank here also has taken a role in urban agriculture with actually 2 5-acre sites here in Columbus that they're growing on under the title of Urban Farms of Central Ohio. They actually were one of our first partners to navigate the process of high tunnels in our community and highlight some of the things we needed to address from a zoning and planning perspective. They also, in addition to those tools, they've also been the host for USDA dollars that have come through, I believe, NRCS. And that is, they've helped to put that out for season extension. So we've been engaged with them. That's a total of 3 years. We've gone through year 2. They're in the process of seeing those grantees for year 2 actually building their high tunnels right now. And we'll have 1 more year of that funding. So there's been a lot of intersection there with our food bank.
Tim here, we have 2 very large emergency food providers that really cover the eastern half of Wisconsin, and one hunger task force maybe somewhat uniquely actually took over a county farm just outside Milwaukee County. So they're actually growing food on a fairly large farm. I believe it's about 75 acres, and integrating that into their food system. And the leader of that hunger task force is also a major food leader in terms of initiatives in the Food Policy Council and keeping folks informed about state level changes in terms of SNAP benefits and WIC, et cetera. And she's a great leader in that regard. And then secondly, Feeding Wisconsin is the other major that we have. And actually we work with them on a fair amount of neighborhood work, and we were kind of slowly exploring the possibility of one of their major warehouse areas, which is really in one of our most challenged neighborhoods, being used as a potential food hub, which would be a wonderful idea if we could really put the pieces together for that. And then we've got a wonderful smaller emergency food operation, River West Food Pantry, which actually has its own small farm within the city and really works with residents in that neighborhood, helping them grow food, and food from that site is used within their emergency food system.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for speaking, all 7 of our speakers. I think this is a record in terms of the FPN webinar series, fitting in as many speakers as we can. Unless there's any other questions, we'll go ahead and close it out. And we will send a follow-up email with the link to the video of this recording, the slides, and also follow-up resources that were discussed on the webinar. So thank you all again for attending, and have a great day.